What? Did you just get another phone call from a financial advisor trying to sell you some product or service? How do you even know who is the right advisor for you, or how to pick somebody to help you with your financial challenges? Let's talk about that in the next video with Wealth and Whiskey. Hello folks, welcome to Wealth and Whiskey, where every conversation is aged and unfiltered. A lot like me, I'm more aged and some of that's unfiltered. Anyway, I'm Roger Kiger. I've been a certified financial planner and investment advisor for about 30 years. I've been helping people build wealth and protect their legacies. So this channel is about pulling back the curtain and sharing some things about our industry that maybe a lot of people didn't know. So that's why we call it Aged and Unfiltered, right? So the topic I want to talk about today is how to pick an advisor. So let me start with a couple of ways of how not to pick an advisor, because it's real easy to go down to the local bank when you're opening an account and talk to whoever's sitting at the desk that might have a particular investment they think is a great thing for everybody. Maybe that's okay for a small amount of money for some short time period or whatever. How not to do it? Don't pick an advisor because they're necessarily well-spoken, or because they drive a nice car, or because they're great salespeople. You really want an advisor that's more of a service person that's going to help you down the road, more so than just what they're doing on the front end. So let me clarify that a little bit by talking through 8 or 10 different concepts. And I actually wrote an ebook about this, and you can download it here. There'll be a link at the end of the video if you want to download the ebook. But I think the most important thing, and the first thing to start with, is communication. As you meet advisors, you can find them at your local brokerage firm, your local bank. You can look up on the internet. You can search for all kinds of search terms, whatever you want to use, and you'll find a bazillion different people like me. But at the end of the day, it's got to be about the communication, about can you talk to them about your issues? Can you share what your concerns are, what your goals are? Because if that advisor doesn't know what you're trying to accomplish, or if that advisor says, I've got the perfect investment, and they run right into some specific product or service that doesn't apply to you, well, then they're not listening to what you're looking for. But to be fair, that goes both ways, because we have had clients in the past that haven't listened to what we've been trying to tell them about their accounts, right? So that communication has to be mutually respected, but also you have to have the ability to communicate both ways, primarily about what your concerns are, what your issues are, and what you're trying to accomplish. Without that, no advisor can help you get to where you're going. So the second thing is, we get asked a lot, what is it that we really do? Yeah, we don't sit on the back of our yachts and pick stocks and do stock trades on our cell phone all day. We don't look at stock screens all day, every day. We spend more time really doing admin stuff, doing financial planning things, and trying to think through calculations, problems, tax issues, estate issues. We spend more time dealing with stuff on the back end. And when I say more time, it's probably 60 or 70% of our time dealing with those types of issues. Again, you may have heard me talk about this in one of the other videos, but a simple example is we need to look at the beneficiaries on every account and make sure that aligns with the beneficiaries in your will or your trust. Because if they're not aligned, that's a problem. So really what we do is more research and working on behind the scenes a little bit. There's some amount of our time is spent with a client, with a customer. But at the end of the day, we really need to spend a lot of time in the back office kind of doing some of that work. So here's another question. I think the third thing that everybody should ask every advisor is how many clients do they serve? And I'm not going to pick on specific firms, but there are a lot of firms that do a great job at marketing. And it's because they want to load up every advisor with as many clients as they can service. So if an advisor is servicing 300, 400, 500 families, what are they really doing? I had this position in a former life with a regional bank, and I had to take care of 300 to 350 families. I essentially was an order taker, right? So I was dealing with loans and checking accounts, and even though I was supposed to handle the investments, that was the afterthought, right? So yeah, I can handle 500 families if I give everybody the same portfolio. Maybe that's okay for some large institutional firm, but I feel like clients deserve a little bit better. And for an advisor to address every component of your financial well-being, it takes time, which means our time as an advisor is only scalable to a certain level. Therefore, we can only handle a certain amount of clients. Maybe that's 100, maybe it's 200. It depends on the complexities and the difficulties of the client base. But I could make a pretty strong argument that between 100 and 200 families, an advisor's time is going to be pretty busy dealing with all the things that need to be addressed on an ongoing basis. Anyway, so enough about that. Let's talk about the fourth thing, which is how we get paid. And for whatever reason, clients don't ask us that. You should always feel comfortable asking your advisor how they get paid. And there's a couple different ways. One is a commission based on us selling an investment product. Two is a fee-based account management fee. Three is a straight consulting fee. Those are all okay as long as you understand what those are and what we get compensated for. What's not okay, and this, again, Agent Unfiltered, right? This is my opinion. What I think is not okay is when any financial advisor says, there's no fee. There's always a fee. There's always a fee somehow. We don't work for free. Nobody in my industry works for free. So how do they get paid? Sometimes that's an investment product that has a commission that pays us something on the back end, but that money's got to come from somewhere. So just take that into consideration when you're talking to an advisor or interviewing somebody about handling your financial affairs. That's an important piece. And part of that, so the next thing is what are their services? Do they provide planning services, or do they just manage a specific type of investment? Maybe they manage all the investments as part of the planning services. So those are all really important, because if you talk to somebody who says, I've got the investment for you, maybe it's the same investment they're selling to everybody else that sits down in front of them. So just know that when you talk to somebody that you don't know, or you don't understand how they get paid, or you don't know what they do, ask them these questions. So I think another thing that you can ask is, how are we different, right? How are we different from a wirehouse or a bank or a small regional firm, or some of the names of firms that you've heard from? You know, what is our product or our service or a specialty that makes us different? Again, you need to know how that relates to what you're trying to accomplish. Because if I'm different because I'm selling some private equity deal and getting compensated for selling stock in some private company somewhere, and that's the only thing I do, well, that's great for a 5 or 10% piece of somebody's allocation. Well, that's not appropriate for all of somebody's allocation. So again, ask that question. So I've had a lot of people ask me how we pick investments, which is a great question. Do we pick them based on how we get paid? Do we pick them based on performance? Do we pick them based on, market protection? Is there the downside protection if something happens to the market? How do we pick those investments? Again, I feel like the response should be, well, it depends on the client and what the client needs, not based on what my institution sells or based on, well, I input it into some AI stock screener and it picked 18 stocks for me. Let's use those, right? So it is important to ask how you use those, how they pick those investments. And if they're fiduciaries, we can have a whole conversation about fiduciaries and what is a fiduciary. Just know that fiduciaries always have to put the client's best interest first. So there are a lot of advisors that will say, well, we're not fiduciaries, but we do what's right for you. Maybe, but if it's vague, it seems a little weird to me. I mean, the fiduciary standard is based on investment advisors that have passed a certain investment exam that says they have to put the client's needs first. So asking if they're fiduciaries is always a great thing. So again, the other thing is, how do we pick stocks? We talked about that a little bit. Do we have a back office that researches that? Is it based on how I feel today or how the market's doing tomorrow or how I feel about my political views? I'm going to argue that none of those are the right answer, right? It needs to be research-based, fact-based. Use the tools and the research and the resources that are available to an advisor to pick a true professional. And the last couple things really are, how long has that advisor been in business? I know a lot of young advisors that are doing a great job marketing themselves. They're smart, they're good looking, they're young people, they know how to talk to people. They've been doing this for at least 6 months, maybe a year, but they know how to sell because they got the best sales training possible from the institution where they work. Does that mean they know how to manage your financial well-being? Because I could argue there's not a whole lot of do-overs in our profession, right? It needs to be done right the first time. So the experience is important. And the backside of that is how long are they going to be there? Because if you find somebody that's got a whole lot of experience, but they're only going to be there for 6 months or a year, then you got to go through all this again? That's not worth it either. So ask these questions. By asking these questions on the front end, you'll understand or you'll get some clarity around the first thing that I talked about, which was communication. If they don't want to answer these questions, you'll understand the communication is probably not there. And there's a reason they don't want to talk about these things, right? So I won't beat that up too much for today. But financial success, it's not found in get-rich-quick schemes. It's found in patience, diligence. It's not easy, but it happens over time. So to start that journey, download the Legacy Blueprint in the link below. We'll send you the ebook that talks about the same things we talked about here on how to choose an advisor. And don't forget, if you like this video, subscribe to the Wealth and Whiskey channel so you don't ever miss a conversation, because we'll talk about things that maybe other advisors won't. But I very much appreciate your time and look forward to talking to you again in our Wealth and Whiskey channel. So, cheers.